Hi, and welcome back. As we all know, getting rid of things is hard. When you've spent years collecting things, memories, investments, they seem like part of your life, and getting rid of them seems like getting rid of part of you. When this is the case, how do you walk away from these things? In this video, I'll share with you some emotional hurdles that I faced when I was decluttering all of my things to get ready to travel full time. I will talk about some of the mistakes I made that made it even harder, and I'll go over some of the strategies that I developed to help me move on. If you're struggling to downsize, hopefully this information will help you make the process easier, faster, and a whole lot less painful. If you're new here, my name is Kiria, and I've traveled to almost 60 countries. And in 2024, I retired early, sold my house, and got rid of all my things so that I could travel the world full time. Okay, let's get started. The first thing I learned is that I needed to get out of the analysis paralysis. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted the process to be smooth and seamless. I wanted it to be efficient. And that kept me from starting at all. I told myself that I didn't want to be inefficient, but really I was just putting things off. Once I finally started, it wasn't the most efficient process, and I had to learn a lot along the way, but it got done. You know what they say, right? Perfect is the enemy of good. I wanted everything to be perfect, but I was just doing nothing, so it wasn't helping me at all. Depending on your timeline, even 10 minutes or an hour a day can make a huge difference. If you set a timer, you can focus on one drawer or closet or cupboard or section of the garage or whatever the thing is that you've decided to tackle that day. This makes it seem a little less daunting because I think if you open up the garage door and you think, oh my gosh, I have to organize all of this at the same time, you just close it and you walk away because it's just overwhelming, right? So break it up into tiny pieces and work on it a little bit each day or week or whatever your timeline is. Also, I always kept a bag in my closet so that anytime I put on something and noticed a hole, I would actually throw that away or noticed it was a little too small for me, or I don't know, whatever the thing was, I would put it in the bag, and then I established a once a week Goodwill run. So even if the bag only had a few things in it, I would take it to Goodwill. And most of the time it wasn't just a few things. Oftentimes it was several bags. But I just made sure I got it out of the house so I wasn't tempted to look through the bag again and maybe reclaim some of those things. It's amazing how fast we forget why we put it in the bag, right? Like, oh, but I like this shirt. But wait, it was too short for me, or it was too small, or it makes, something look bad, right? Like, why is it so hard? So it helped me a lot to just get the stuff out of the house completely. The other thing I had to learn is that it takes time. Trying to do this in a rush is really not the way to go. It can just be stressful, and then you'll have a little regret after you've gotten rid of something because you did it too fast and you didn't really think things through. So I knew that I was going to quit my job and travel probably about a year before I actually did it. So I kind of started gathering my thoughts at that point and thinking things through a little bit. This also gave me a chance to kind of sit with my memories instead of just throwing things into a bag and then, like I said, regretting that you didn't think about it more. Also, at first, I wasn't sure if I was going to Airbnb out my house, so I considered doing that, which would mean I would keep some furniture and appliances and whatnot. And ultimately, I decided that I wasn't going to do that because I was a little bit worried that maybe if it didn't rent out, then I would want to sell the house after that. And I really didn't want to have to deal with any of that stuff while I was on the road. I wanted it to just kind of be a clean break. And I'm really glad I did, because that way I just got rid of everything. I ripped off the Band-Aid. I didn't have to slowly, like the frog in the hot water, be dipped in and finally realize that it's too hot. I just got rid of it all. And that seems kind of harsh and difficult to think of if you're just getting started. But I think in the end, looking back, I'm glad that I did it that way. What I did to make things a little bit easier for myself is that I disassembled the bed that was in my spare room and I put that in the garage. And then I made my spare room into basically a sorting room. I had a pile for Goodwill, one pile of things maybe to give to friends and family, and then a sell pile, but the sell pile was split into two, which would be things to list and things that are already listed. And each week I had a reminder on my calendar and it would pop up, and this is what I would do. I would find out if my friends and family had wanted the things that I was offering for that week. If they said no, I would either put those things into the Goodwill pile or into the to be listed sell pile, and then I would take a run to Goodwill, my weekly run to Goodwill. This way, it kept things moving and it kept me feeling like I was actually making progress and being productive, which is important to me. I don't like feeling like I'm just doing a lot of work and not getting a lot of outcome from it. And so that made me feel like this is a good thing. Even if it was just one thing you take to Goodwill or whatever, it was still movement, and that helped a lot. Part of my weekly routine was also to change the pricing on the items I was selling. So either if I had listed it the week before, either I might decrease the price if it hadn't sold, or I might delist it completely and put it in the Goodwill pile. So I would try to keep those things moving as well, not just stagnating on the market forever. I mean, ultimately, I knew I wanted to get rid of them, and so if I could get a little money for them, great, but if not, I needed to just get them out of the house. So I think for me, I'm a scheduled person, I'm a planner. I like having that schedule, and that made me more likely to keep working on it and moving forward. Another thing I learned is that selling can really give you a sense of accomplishment, but you can't let selling be the only way to get a sense of accomplishment. I definitely felt better if I could get money for something. That made me feel like I wasn't just being wasteful, I guess. But even in the end, if I could get $5 for a $100 item, I was like, whoopee, made me feel better, right? And if this helps you too, that's great. But if you give it away and it's being used by somebody who needs it or wants it, then I think that should be a sense of satisfaction as well. Also, I got a little bit mucked up in the weeds about getting a certain price for certain things, and I think that was bad. So I did get some offers on some things at the beginning that I probably should have just taken, but I thought I could get better, and in the end, I ended up giving away those things for free. So I should have just taken those offers, which would have saved me time and a headache and having to take the things to Goodwill. So all in all, just you need to be realistic about what a thing is worth to other people. Maybe in your mind it's worth a lot, but really, realistically, it's not worth as much as you think. So be willing to decrease the price significantly, and then you can still get some money and not have to give it away for free. But if you do give it away for free, once again, just remember it's going to a good home. So don't worry about the fact that you didn't get money for that. That's not the value of it. Also, if you do have the time to sell things, if that's what you decide to do, it is very interesting what people will buy. I sold indoor and outdoor plants. I sold crafts that I actually had used some of them, and I just boxed them up into like a category or a collection, and I sold those. And I sold picture frames that I had bought with an intention of doing a project, and I painted them and everything and then never used them, and people bought those. I just was very upfront and honest with everybody about what the condition or the situation was, and people still bought a lot of the stuff. So if you have DVDs or something like that, it might make sense to put them all into a collection by a director or a musician or composer or whatever, and people will buy the collection maybe where they won't buy the single item. Also, just getting back to the analysis paralysis real quick, I was very, very hesitant to list my first thing for sale. Not knowing what the shipping process is like, or if you're using Facebook Marketplace, knowing someone's going to come over to your house, all those things just kind of made me hesitant. But I started by just putting one thing on eBay and one thing on Facebook Marketplace and kind of seeing how that went. And that made me a lot more comfortable with doing it a little bit more after that. Also, I think I started off with the easy things, like on eBay. It was easier for me if it was a square item. That way it was easier to ship, right? So maybe a book or a pair of shoes in a box. That way it's super easy. I don't have to worry about how much does that thing weigh? How am I going to package it? All those things that kind of, again, analysis paralysis, swirl around in your mind and keep you from getting started. So, and the same thing with Facebook. At first, I just put a cheaper item on, like I put a couple of lamps, and that way we'll see what happens. And in the end, I ended up basically shipping pretty much everything. I sold camera equipment, and on Facebook Marketplace, I just started putting stuff on my porch, and they could just come pick it up whenever they wanted and Venmo me whenever they had the time. It's interesting how you evolve over the time. And I started thinking, like, if they take the $10 lamp off my porch and don't Venmo me, it's not going to be the end of the world. But at the beginning, you just really overthink things, or I do at least. So I think not overthinking things helps a lot. The next thing I learned was to work backwards. So it took me a little while to get to this point, but once I decided I'm not going to Airbnb my house out, I'm not going to get a storage unit, and so I need to get rid of basically everything, then I could work backwards from there. So let's give an example of clothing. I knew that I was going to be spending 1 year bicycling around the US and Canada, and then I was going to travel around using a carry-on only after that. So what I did is I just packed up all my biking bags and I packed up my carry-on bag. And then I knew that's what I'm taking with me. I'm good to go. I'm done. And then after that, I kept a certain amount of outfits for working because I knew I was going to be still working for a while. A couple of outfits for running, a couple of everyday outfits. I kept those in a little side area. And then I knew I'm getting rid of pretty much everything else after that. Instead of going through all the stuff one by one, what you're going to keep or get rid of, just figure out the keep and then work on the get rid of. And that makes it a lot easier if you compartmentalize it like that. And then a couple days before I left, I just took all my 5 work outfits, running outfit, everyday outfit, and put it in the Goodwill bag and took one last Goodwill bag to Goodwill right before I moved out of my house. I also did this with kitchen items. I just kept enough for me to be able to eat, and I gave the rest to Goodwill early on in the process so that I didn't have to think about too much at the very end. The next thing I learned was I just need to air my dirty laundry or not be worried about airing my dirty laundry. I was afraid to put anything on the curb for free because I thought the neighbors are going to look at my stuff, and they're going to judge me, and they're going to think I'm a slob. And what if it sits there for a couple of days and nobody takes it? Then I'm going to be that neighbor with all the crap on their yard. And I was just worried for no reason. I ended up putting a few things in my driveway for free, and they were gone within a few hours. And I wish I just would have done that way, way earlier because it would have saved me so many trips to Goodwill and so much worry about how I was going to get rid of these things and where I was going to take them and all that other stuff. So just swallow your pride and air your dirty laundry to your neighbors. I also learned that time is money. I wanted everything to go to the perfect place. And a lot of things are kind of confusing, right? Like, where do you take a mattress? Where do you take a paint canister that has half of a wet thing of paint in it? Where do you take a canister that has half of a dry thing of paint in it? Where do you take batteries and electronics and all those other little things that you can't just put in the trash? So I spend a lot of time researching all these things, and then I spent a lot of time taking them each to their own designated spot so I could responsibly get rid of everything. And I think in the end, looking back, it may be worth just paying someone to do that. So there's companies that will come and get your stuff. In the Bay Area, there's one called Nixit, and essentially they will recycle or donate at least 80% of everything that they pick up. And they'll even take unused food that's not expired and donate that. So, they'll pretty much take anything. So instead of me spending my time worrying about where each thing should go, I should just leave it to the experts. And sure, it might cost a couple $100s or something, but it might be worth it for your peace of mind. I also learned to be wary of the what if. There's so many what ifs. What if I need this later? What if someone else wants it? But really, have you used this item in the last 6 months? Probably not. Have you used it in the last year? Probably not. If not, it might be time to get rid of it. Does your neighbor have one? If they do, maybe it's time to get rid of yours. And if you ever need to borrow it from your neighbor, you can do that. But chances are you won't need to borrow it from your neighbor, but at least that will give you the peace of mind that you can get rid of it and know that you could have one available if you need it. Another thing I learned is that not very many people want your stuff. So I did give some stuff away to friends and family, but the majority of the stuff I ended up donating or giving away or selling. Don't try to pawn off everything on your family, and they'll be a lot happier if you don't. I think my mom was pretty tired of me asking her if she wanted some stuff. But I'm like, this is quality stuff. I paid a lot of money for it. But you know what? Going back to all the other things, you just need to get rid of it. And if it's you get rid of it for free, it's going to someone who wants it or needs it. So don't worry about it. Some of the hardest ones are the next few that I have. And the next one is that memories are in your mind and they're not in your possessions. So one of the harder things to get rid of is things that have memories associated with them. So what I did to combat this is I spent time with the item, and then I either took a photograph of it or I scanned it if it was a picture or a note or whatever, and then I got rid of it. And it was very cathartic. For example, one of the things I kept, which I'm not sure why I did, but I had a bunch of baseball hats from when I was in Little League. I know, that's a long time ago, right? But I went through the box, I put on the hat, I took a picture with the hat, and then I put the hat in the bin. And I did that with all the hats, and so I have stupid pictures of myself with all my Little League hats on, but it made it like kind of like a going away party. So you're not really too worried about the fact that you're not gonna have this item anymore, and you can move on. I also scanned notes and letters that I had gotten from friends. I scanned pictures and postcards, and I got rid of all of them. And it felt a little hard at the time, but looking back afterward, it's so nice. And now I can actually access those anytime I want because they're all digitized. So when I'm in whatever country I'm in, I can look at that note that my friend gave me when she was a kindergartner, or the picture I have of me and my mom, and I can remember that from afar. So it's not doing any good sitting in a box anywhere. However, speaking of sitting in boxes, I did keep a few things, and that's okay, I think. That's something I had to kind of wrap my mind around. I didn't need to get rid of everything. It didn't have to be an all or none situation. So I kept my quilts that 2 grandmothers have made for me. And I'll go back and I'll look at them in a few years or whatever, and I'll decide whether I still want to keep them. But for now, I didn't really want to have to make that decision right now. So it's okay to have a box in someone's attic. You don't have to be a complete minimalist right from the get-go. You can revisit the box or leave the photos and come back and scan them later. It doesn't have to be such a big project right from the get-go. So just remember that. The other thing I learned is don't let the sunk cost fallacy win. So anything I've spent a lot of money on, I have a really hard time getting rid of. But just because you spent a lot of money on them doesn't mean you've used them or you need them. I did keep a couple of things like my skis and my camping gear, which I will be using. But to be honest, I can rent skis or camping gear if I need them. So I technically could probably get rid of those as well. Luckily, my parents have a little nook where they don't mind if I leave a couple of things. But if you don't have this luxury, you are gonna have to decide whether or not it's worth storing or keeping when you might be able to rent it or borrow it. This next one is actually the hardest for me. Gifts from other people are really hard to give away because of guilt. If I know that somebody spent time thinking of me, whether they made the item or they bought it, they spent their good hard-earned money on me, and I just feel like I am ungrateful if I throw that thing away or give it away. An example of this is a nice silverware set that my parents got me for my housewarming, and I didn't want to just give it away because it was a nice silverware set. So I tried to sell it. Nobody wanted to buy it. I ended up just leaving it on my curb, and someone came and took it right away. So they're gonna get some use out of it, but I felt like I was wasting their money, which feels even worse than wasting my own. However, you have to flip your mindset and think that you're giving these things a new home with a new owner who will love them or appreciate them or use them. So it's actually not a waste, but it is hard to wrap your mind around that. The other thing I learned is you won't miss things. You think you're gonna miss things, but you're not gonna miss things. I'm looking back now and I don't think I miss really anything that I got rid of. But one of the things that was really hard for me to get rid of was books. I had a bunch of old college textbooks and notes that I had kept. I had a bunch of books that I had read already and thought like, oh, I'm gonna read those again. And then I had a bunch of books that I actually bought at a thrift store for probably next to nothing, and I thought I was gonna read and I never got around to it. So that was kind of threefold. One, the college books, I thought, oh, I'll need to reference them at some point. The books that I loved and wanted to reread, that was like nostalgia. And then the books that I bought, I spent money on and I hadn't read them yet, so that's a waste of money, right? But I got rid of all of them, and a year and a half later, I don't miss them. I can always get them from the library, or in the case of college textbooks, I can Google most of that information. So I don't know why I held on so much, but now that I don't have them anymore, I don't miss them at all. The next thing I learned is you can buy it later if you need it. So instead of worrying about getting rid of something and keeping it in storage, just get rid of it. And if you need another one later, you can buy it. And I know that sounds wasteful and not frugal at all, but isn't it better for someone to actually use it while you're not using it? My good example for that one is my television. It was a gift. It was expensive. It was very large. It had all the modern conveniences and everything. And I thought, oh, maybe I should put this in storage. And that way, if I come back, whatever, I'll have a nice TV. But when and if I come back, when is that going to be? That's going to be in 10 years, maybe? 5 years, 10 years? Technology advances so fast that even if it's in 5 years, they're probably going to be cheaper and bigger and faster and have more cool things. So why not just get rid of it and let someone else use it when it's relevant and not have this old thing when I come back? But as a frugal person, that is very hard to wrap your mind around sometimes. In conclusion, getting rid of things is hard, but once you do it, it really feels very rewarding, and it leaves more room in your life for more important things like people and experiences. After going through a big declutter, it helps us think twice the next time we think about buying something, to think, do I really need this? And do I want it to sit? What if it just sits? Is this worth my money? And what if I have to throw it away later or get rid of it later? It's going to be a pain. So I think it's good to go through that process to make you more realistic about your current purchases. Obviously, right now I'm just traveling out of a carry-on, so I don't really have room to carry anything. So that also helps me to not buy. But even if I was to go back home, I'm sure that I would be a little more conservative with my purchases after having to get rid of so much stuff. So now it's your turn. Leave a note in the comments and let me know, what pain points do you have when you're decluttering? And what tips do you have for someone else who's trying to minimize their stuff? Once again, thank you for watching and happy travels.